Warning. The following topics for this video will be focusing on abuse, domestic abuse, and child abuse. I know this may be a spoiler for what's coming, but considering the subject matter today, I did not feel comfortable not giving this video a content warning. Especially since I'm not someone with a degree in psychology, and I'm only giving my opinions and interpretations to the best of my ability of what I'm seeing. If this is not something you feel comfortable with watching, then please turn off this video now and go do something you feel more comfortable with. For those of you who stayed, then get comfortable, because we're about to look at a place where children are groomed to perform terrifying acts, enemies abound even in those that we're supposed to lean on, and where one brave girl must fight against her own emotional abuse and neglect to find her way back home. For those of you ready for this video, then prepare yourself for me to analyze something truly horrifying for this Halloween. You have been warned. This is Coraline. Hello everyone, and welcome to Wolf Tales, where storytelling runs wild. Sorry for the more serious intro, but like I said, I didn't feel right making this video without putting, well, that in there. With that out of the way, who here loves scary tales? From the terrifying ethics of Frankenstein and his monster, to the horrifying gore of Saw, what can send chill up our spines better than horror? Especially around this time of year. For me, a good scary story can be just the thing to welcome in the fall season, to chase away evil spirits, and to cuddle up with some cuties in my cave. While many tales have stuck with me over the years, none have stuck more than one of Neil Gaiman's most famous tales, Coraline. For those who haven't heard this wonderful tale in either its book or movie version, let me give you a quick recap. Coraline Jones is a young girl who seems to move into a simple home with her workaholic parents. Not much seems off about the house until she discovers a door in a wall that leads to another world. While everything seems perfect, Coraline starts to discover that the other world is not what it appears, and soon must escape or face the sinister wrath of the other mother. Filled with cats, buttons, imagination, and fear, Coraline is one tale you will never forget. The movie, while different compared to the book, is a fairly faithful adaptation. Though interestingly enough, the movie is actually considered tamer than the book, with many of the more grotesque or graphic scenes reworked or left out completely. For many, this is a childhood horror classic that can be seen as their stepping stone into a more sinister tale as they grow. But when some think back to what was the most disturbing part of the story, many seem to grab at surface-level concepts. The buttons in their eyes, the fact that the rats are spies, or heck, some even saying that it was the other mother's spider-like design that they were given in the movie. While yes, I can confirm that these are all creepy, they're not the true horror of the tale. No, in my opinion, these are just facades of the real terror that the story is trying to tell. A disgusting, horrible, and vile topic that plagues many through their lives and traps so many of them in its horrendous grasp every day. Some leading to much worse fates than Coraline's, and some not even living past the age Coraline was. What's the true horror of Coraline, you may ask? It's none other than the gut-wrenching, realistic depiction that the story makes about child abuse. For those of you who think I mean just when something like Coraline getting hurt by the other mother, or maybe the manipulation that's shown in the film or book, that's not it. Neil Gaiman makes it clear that there are things to fear on both sides of the door. Be it the blatant physical abuse and other kinds of abuse that the other mother has, or more subtle ones that are found throughout the book, like emotional abuse and Coraline's parents. According to the Children's Aid Society, emotional abuse is defined as all acts that result in the lack of a nurturing environment for a child, and occurs when the caregiver treats the child in such a negative way that the child's concept of self is severely impaired. Claimed by the Society as one of the most difficult to identify and prove abuses, emotional abuse is usually identified as when the parents constantly yell, make demeaning remarks, reject, ignore, or isolate the child, and terrorize the child. When examining our young heroine herself, we see she goes through emotional abuse on both sides. While we'll get to the other parents soon, let's first turn our attention to the real parents. Coraline's parents, though clear at times they care for her, do often push her away, leaving her isolated alone for much of her time. In the movie, this is lessened a bit because she does have YB, but she's still left wandering alone and barely has an attachment to her parents. Heck, one of the reasons the other world is so alluring is because they make her feel actually wanted. Maybe one is a snack or one is a toy, but still wanted. This is one of the reasons that despite the very clear warning signs that something is wrong, Coraline keeps coming back. Because in a way, Coraline receives more love from these monsters than her real parents. Coraline's mother is almost always outwardly cold and cruel, but inwardly she truly loves Coraline. The other mother, on the other hand, is a foil to this because she seems outwardly loving and nice, but is inwardly incredibly cruel. Coraline nodded. It was true the other mother loved her, but she loved Coraline as a miser loves money, or a dragon loves its gold. In the other mother's eyes, Coraline knew she was just a possession and nothing more. As for the father, while he does ignore her for work almost on a daily basis, he does care about her safety when he saves her from a pile of bees. Her other father, on the other hand, gives her more time, but will also harm her if it pleases the other mother. As much as we know Coraline's parents really do love her, their actions are considered abusive and have very clear impacts on our young protagonist. Coraline Jones is a spunky, intelligent, and self-reliant gal who's pretty brave for an 11-year-old. We admire her feats and label this behavior as a typical protagonist. After all, so many young protagonists have had similar traits, do they not? But when looking at them in a new light, we see this as not a protagonist bursting from the pages, but a scared and neglected child desperate to belong and feel safe. Like I mentioned, the actions of her parents affect Coraline by making her feel unwanted, and she has to grow up earlier than she should. In the movie, Coraline has a poison oak itch that the parents almost seem to ignore in order to keep working. I mean, she's itching right in front of them and they do nothing. No doctor, medicine, or even showing sympathy. They just seem to let her suffer or wait till it fixes it on its own. Not exactly what I would call Parents of the Year, but I think that's the point. Coraline's themes of things are not what they appear is demonstrated in almost every page. But in the case of abuse, the horror is not just the fact that there is abuse, but the gray area of abuse. How situations are not exactly as black or white as one would think, and how abuse still happens even without any physical marks. Sometimes it can be a child who isolates themselves from others, or one who self-deprecates themselves. The fine line between abuse and just firm parenting is tricky to define and terrifying to imagine because of how bad we know a situation can get. And before we go any further, this is your final warning, my dear watchers. I wanted to try and get the lighter side of this horror done first, but now we're going into some topics that might hit some people's triggers. If you still want to watch till the end, then jump to this number right here and I'll cover off the conclusion and how it affects Coraline. For those of you who are staying for this part, then get ready to dive into the child smuggling, grooming, and domestically violent land that is the other world. From the structure of the world to even the names of some of the characters, each and every part of the other world is a metaphor of child abuse. Even calling the place and the people who live there other world, other mother, other father, etc. is on purpose to call out the behavior. Othering a person or a group is a horrible practice where you label them as something that doesn't fit into the norms of the social groups and influences how people perceive them. While I am in no way condoning the use of othering, here the author uses it a bit differently. In the context of Coraline, Neil Gaiman is saying that people who abuse children are not human, and that this behavior is not accepted in normal society. Neil Gaiman emphasizes this by making the real forms of the otherworld inhabitants inhuman and monstrous, where the line that is made between acceptable and unacceptable is through a mere house tunnel. On the one side of the wall, the characters are good-natured outcasts who are doing their best to survive, and in the other side, they're beings that fit into the social norms, but the darker versions of them. Examining Mrs. Spink and Forcible, they're just two retired actresses on the one side of the wall, if not a bit self-centered and lonely. In the other world, they trick Coraline to performing a rather inappropriate performance in the film and a dangerous knife-throwing act in the book. Coraline isn't given any say in the matter, and when she's done, is given praise and gifts for the performance, but it feels a little wrong. Examining these actions, it seems the author is trying to make a metaphor for a child grooming situation, which is not that much of a stretch when looking at the movie version and the, interesting starting outfits. The author even gives a hint at the nature of these women in the other world by their names. I mean, Miss Forcible. Miss Forcible. This pattern also extends to Mr. Bobo, even though we know very little about it. In one world, he's a recluse that's supposed to have a mouse circus, but is a good-meaning guy in the end. In the other world, he's a creepy circus performer who tries to lure Coraline into a trap with colorful circus acts and charismatic words. Made up of a plethora of rats, he's a metaphor for child kidnappers who steal children away, much like the literary depiction of rats, thieving, conniving, and shifty. Though, in real life, many rats are adorable. While these depictions of Mr. Bobo, Mrs. Spink, and Forcible are very sick and twisted, they are very simple when compared to the other mother and father. As mentioned prior, the other parents do some pretty horrible things to Coraline. From trying to kidnap the young kid in the beginning, to even trying to kill her in the end, these parents are downright vile. Even if the other father does try to help Coraline with hints, it doesn't excuse his complacency in the abuse. However, it's not just physical abuse that these other parents are, well, guilty of. The other parents demonstrate many different kinds of emotional and psychological abuse, as well as neglect. They gaslight Coraline to mess with her head and isolate her into obeying. They give her gifts and trinkets as bribes to accept the life she's now in, and condition her that this abuse is love by preying on her desire for a familiar connection. While these acts may not seem very dangerous to some, these are actually very dangerous forms of abuse with long-lasting effects. Many abuse victims never escape their situations because of the conditionings they face, oftentimes making them question if what's going on around them is really as bad as it is, or if they deserve it. So what if I'm being treated poorly? I get love, don't I? So what if I'm given no boundaries and lose my identity as a person? Other people probably have it worse than I, don't they? So what if I'm trapped in one place for the rest of my life? It's nice here, isn't it? As the ghost children put it,
gave all that we asked, yet we still wanted more. So we let her sew the buttons. She said that she loved us, but she locked us here and ate up our lives.
Many children in abusive homes feel trapped and unable to do anything to change their lives. While some do run away and some get help, help doesn't always happen, and when it comes, it's oftentimes too late. Because of this, children in abuse cases oftentimes feel helpless and become husks of their former selves as they see no hope for the future. And in some pretty bad cases, the end results are very tragic. But wait, you may say, Neil Gaiman gave us a good ending, didn't he? On the surface, yeah, he did. Coraline got her family back, the Beldam was gone, and the key was hidden for good. Happy ending, right? Well, this, dear viewers, is not true. For you see, just because Neil Gaiman shows us Coraline is fine for the moment, there is a good chance she'll face a horror for the rest of her life. The lingering effects of trauma, such as PTSD. PTSD is a mental illness that can affect anyone who has witnessed or experienced a traumatic event. Children with PTSD often exhibit many symptoms like nightmares, trouble sleeping, continued fear and sadness, trouble controlling their anger, avoiding people or places linked to the event, constant negativity, and sometimes even hyperarousal, which is the constant vigilance of their surroundings. It can also be called hypervigilance. Though we do not see much of Coraline after she leaves the other world, we do see a lot of her black cat before and after. While some may see this as a typical fairy tale archetype, that black cat is very important because of what it represents: Coraline's mind. See, the cat only speaks when Coraline enters the other world, after she starts to sense something's wrong. As he says, he has nothing to say in her world, so why does he talk? Because her senses are clearer in that world. In here, as the tale continues, not only do we see them getting more along, but the cat seems to act like Coraline and guide her through this fog of abuse. He's empathetic towards her, fearful of the Beldam, angry at her actions, intelligent, clever, and has a bit of sass like Coraline herself. After Coraline is done in the other world, you would think that the cat would then leave, but he doesn't. He lingers around and stays even after the danger has supposedly disappeared to warn her about the hand. After she traps the hand in the well, again you would think he'd move on, but he stays, as if there is still danger to come. Which, I mean, kind of makes sense, right? She's living with her original parents and their neglect in the house where the trauma happened. I'm not surprised she would feel danger. The fact is that Coraline is in a situation where she would be reminded of her trauma every day and have to face memories and triggers of those events on a daily basis. That she has a constant reminder of everything could go wrong and something could be hiding just in the shadows, and that maybe the next stranger she meets is connected to the Beldam. And that, dear watchers, is the point of the horror. When we're young and we look at Coraline, we think it's just a fairy tale. But as we grow, we learn the truth. That the other world is real, as is the ghost children, as is the Beldam. They're all around us all the time, keeping children locked away out of sight and taking them from their families to basements to do unspeakable acts. In some cases, horrifically murdered by sick Beldams for pleasure every day and night of the year. Some get away, and some are caught. But the fact is, they are a presence in our world that never leaves. That's why we look at Coraline differently as a child than as an adult. As a child, we see a colorful yet creepy world, but as adults, we see a gut-wrenching depiction of something that affects millions. Something that makes us even look at our own childhood a little differently. So next time you put this tale in or pick it up from the shelf, keep an eye peeled around you. You never know what button-eyed monster is lurking in the shadows. And that's our video, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. And I ask, what do you think? How do you feel about Coraline, and what part freaked you out the most? Or for those not afraid of the tale, then what is something that you find bone-chilling in other media? Let me know in the comments below. For now, I'm off to go hear some tales and howl at the moon. And then next month, I got 2 videos coming out. An announcement at the beginning of November, and a theory featuring a certain Centaur World's Nowhere King for the end of the month. So for now, this has been Silver Starling. See you next time you want to run with the pack.